We go. Three, two, one. This is Dean Tedder with the Two Party Podcast. I'm on here with Ian Murray. Now you're in Virginia right now, but are you living in Florida currently still?
Well, I kind of do a dual residency thing. I've been working up here in Northern Virginia for the last 6 years doing government contracting work, and I'm still currently serving in the reserves in a unit in Maryland near Baltimore. But my permanent house is still in Florida.
Still in Florida. Okay. Well, again, great to have you on here, Ian. As we always do, your story is interesting. Not only are you a veteran, but you've had some run-in with the law that was not even legit, and
Not really.
while working as a correction officer. So as I read the story, it's obviously you can tell the audience a little more detail, but I was looking at your website for our audience listening live. IanMurray.net is where you can look up and kind of touch on some of the story that Ian will be telling us about. But Ian, let's hand it over to you. Kind of tell us about yourself. Tell us where you came from, a little bit about your background, and work us into it.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Florida for the most part. My mom moved us down there when I was about 4 years old after her and my father divorced. I grew up in the Jacksonville area, went to high school at Trinity Christian, and I've always had a fascination with the military. My grandfather was a World War II vet and was in the Army, and I don't know if it was just hearing his war stories all the time and
Yeah.
being around him and his war buddies or just growing up in a military town, but I just always had this strong interest with the military. And I graduated high school in 2001. I went to traditional college for a year. That really wasn't my thing back then.
Yeah.
So I decided to join the military. I started off in the Air Force Reserves. I chose the reserves just because having left college, I wanted to keep my options open in case I
Mm-hmm.
decided to go back to school full time. And my first duty station took me up to Charleston, South Carolina. I was working security forces on Charleston Air Force Base, doing the traditional 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year with them. And after living up there for a little while, I got a job with the Charleston County Sheriff's Department. I was a corrections officer up there for 3 years. It was an okay job, did lots of overtime, made some good friends, got being a younger person, it definitely got me a lot of really good life experience. And, as far as different, dealing with different personalities on top of being in the military.
Yeah.
I
I
got,
always hear in corrections, I always hear most of the officers I speak to or former officers in corrections are always like, there's tons of work, tons of hours, the pay sucks.
yeah, the pay is definitely not that
Yeah.
great.
For what you're doing, right?
For what you're doing, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, at the time though, I think when I got hired on with them, I was 21.
Right.
So, that was my first full-time real salary job.
Yeah.
And, quite frankly, I was fine with it. I had a little one-bedroom apartment and
Life was
um,
simple.
life was very simple. And with all the overtime and everything, it was good enough for me
Mhm.
to, make a good living off of.
Yeah.
I do know there were a lot of people there who struggled though. They had families and
Hmm.
kids and other financial obligations. So for them, it wasn't as good.
Yeah. A
But
lot of the corrections officers I know, my brother being one of them, my younger brother, I know work two to three jobs. I mean, I know a lot of corrections guys. It's more of a second or third job for them because it really doesn't pay well enough, but they have two or three other jobs.
yeah, there were a lot of people there that I worked with that had another job or they just worked boatloads of overtime.
Hmm.
I mean, we had guys there that some of them, made overtime. They made like 2.5 times their base salary
Right.
and just did overtime, and at one point, I was doing that, and
Yeah.
I also had another job for a while. A friend of mine ran a car detailing business, so on my off days, I would help him detail cars, make some extra money. So for a while,
Hmm.
I was working a lot, but at the time, I really had nothing else to do, so it really
Yeah.
didn't bother me too much. We're working all the hours, and it kept me from going out and spending money on other stuff.
Right.
So, but anyway, after about 3 years, it kind of just got to the point where, yeah, it really wasn't going to go any further than that.
Hmm.
When I was younger, I had some aspirations of becoming a police officer, and that they kind of like baited me into the whole idea of like, well, if you come work in the jail for a couple years,
Yeah,
well,
that's your foot in the door, right?
yeah, they said this is your foot in the door. So after 2 years, they said, I went to them and said, okay, when can I apply to be a deputy? Oh, well, it's been changed to 4 years. So then when I got into that year three and started preparing, well, now we require a college degree, although they were
Yeah.
very selective of who
Yeah. Now
they
you got to get the
enforced that rule
certifications. Now
against.
we want the college degree. Yeah. Yeah. My
Hmm.
brother kind of went through the same thing when he started out. Yeah. He got out of the
Yes.
Marines and he did the same thing. He really always wanted, growing up, he always wanted to be a SWAT. He was a real tough kid, did UFC, wrestled. He was a just a tough young kid. And immediately out of high school went in the Marines, got out of the Marine. He actually injured his leg. He was a military police in the Marines. He injured his knee. And then basically at that point, he got kind of had to leave the military. So when he got out, he
Mhm.
was like, "Man, I just want to do SWAT. That's what I want to do. I want to kick doors in and crack heads." And he went to his first interview and said that, and they're like, "No, no,
No, that's not what SWAT does.
no." We're like, that's not really what it is, but it's what we do. That's not what we want." And so told him, they said, "How about this? Let's go the long route with you since you've got a good military background. Let's just go ahead and throw you in corrections first, and you can do that." And they did the same thing with him. They were like, "Oh man, you do a year of corrections, we'll start getting you into the police academy and stuff like that." And they're like, "Well, no, now you need cleat certifications. Now you need this degree. You need a criminal
Yeah.
background or a criminal, what was it, the CSI?" They wanted him to have all that stuff. And he's like, "I'm good. I'm just going to do a private security."
Yeah, and unfortunately, that usually happens to a lot of people, especially in that department. A lot of people, unless um, there were a lot of external factors. If you
Yeah.
knew somebody or you
Yep.
knew you
Always.
had,
Yeah.
it was. But yeah, I saw them waive a lot of those rules for certain
Hmm.
people, and
Yep.
yeah, I got tired of it, and I got tired of the politics, and I decided to pursue a different career. I actually left that and went and got my commercial driver's license and drove
Hmm.
trucks for a while.
Yeah.
I was over
CDL.
the
Yeah.
road for about a year, been to all four corners of the country.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, in about 2008 and nine, that's when the economy kind of
Yep.
took its dump, and
I remember.
the company I was working for went out of business. So I was literally just doing a lot of odd jobs. The National Guard unit, I switched from the Air Force to the Army National Guard, and I was working as a mechanic in the National Guard, and it was so bad that they actually took a roster of people who like were out of work on the civilian side and gave us all like some orders for like 90 days, just to
Yeah.
come in and help do maintenance around the unit, and
Right.
help just catch up with stuff. And
Yep.
so that was kind of nice, and it was a real chill environment. It was just like maybe a dozen people, and the highest ranking person there was like an E5. I was an E4.
Yeah.
So it's like we come in, we do our little work, take 2 hour lunches, and it had its
Yep.
perks. And then in around 2009, I was approached by a friend of mine back down in Florida, and he mentioned that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was hiring corrections, and I told him, I'm like, I really don't want to do that again. I
Yeah.
did it once, and he said, well, listen, I know how your jail up there was, but my friend works there. He's been there for like 25 years. He'd really like to meet you and take you on a tour of the jail. So, he's just asking you to come down and take a
Yeah.
look at what you've got. And I said, what we've got. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I went down there and he introduced me to him, and he took me down to the jail. One thing I liked about their jail versus the one I worked at in Charleston, it was a lot more um, officer friendly. Like, it
Right.
was wasn't direct supervision. The inmates didn't get cable TV. They
Right.
didn't, it's like they didn't give all the inmates all these privileges. Basically, you were more than just a
That stirs up a
babysitter.
lot of stuff. Yeah. People
Yeah, and there was a
don't, and
lot.
on the insides of jails and prisons, I mean, people don't realize, that cable TV, that right there alone causes so many fights and so many
It
things going on.
does.
I mean, it's just so much turmoil. And a lot of, like you said, a lot of those privileges that they give them, same thing. I mean, they become enabled to, I mean, just they get so used to like this privilege, it's a right. And then
Yeah.
somebody takes it away, or somebody changes the channel on the TV, and next thing you know, the whole place is rioting.
Yep. That
Yep.
happened a couple, we always
Yep.
had fights, and
And
yeah,
Jacksonville, coming from Florida, I grew up in Florida, like we talked about before the show. Like I know Jacksonville, and Jacksonville's a pretty tough area. That's a tough little city there.
it is. It's
Yep.
Jacksonville's a working man's town,
Yep.
and it's not a tourist town. So yeah, it's
Yep.
very, blue collar. There's a lot of
Hmm.
industry there. So it's not like Tampa or Miami Beach
Yeah.
or Orlando. It's a lot more. It is a tougher town. I still, like I said, I still have a lot of ties there and I have a lot of friends there, so
Hmm.
I'm still very familiar with how it works.
Yep.
But after seeing the jail, I'm like, well, okay, maybe this is worth giving it a shot. I needed a job with some stability and
Right.
and what really turned me on to Jacksonville was they had a really good retirement system at the time. It was very similar to the military. You do 20 years, and after 20 years, like you retire and you immediately start collecting like a 50 or
Drawing your full
60%
pension. Yeah.
pension. And I'm like,
You
yeah,
can't
that's not
beat
bad
that.
because at the
Yeah.
time I was still in my mid 20s. I'm like, I can
Right.
retire from this in I can buy back a couple of years of my military time, retire when I'm 45 and go get another job. If I was still with them, I'd be retiring in like 2 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what really turned me on to that. So I said, okay, maybe this is worth giving it a chance. So I applied and I went through the really long hiring process. It took like 5 or 6 months, and
Hmm.
I was coming back and forth from South Carolina to Florida. Fortunately, they were consolidating a lot of my appointments because they knew I was coming from out of state.
Yeah.
When I finally got through all the medical appointments, the psych evaluations, the
Yep.
physical tests, everything, I finally ended up at the board interview, and they interviewed me, and I was still in the military, and they
Hmm.
even were the ones that highlighted, like, yeah, we offer paid military leave. So when you would go to drill up to 30 days a year, we'll pay you on top of what you're
Still.
making.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for it. They made it a point to tell me that they had this benefit
Yeah.
and
Which is
advised me to
which is a
use it.
great incentive for someone who's serving still. Right.
Yeah, when I worked for Charleston County, it was really good. They had 45 days for reserve duty and 45 days for active duty. So and we worked a Panama schedule. So like say you got deployed at the start of the fiscal year, the sheriff, who was also in the National Guard, he would let you use it all during your deployment. So in a sense, you could get 6 months of double dip
Right.
paychecks. So I
Right.
mean, like, some departments like really throw it on
Yeah.
there.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, Jacksonville wasn't quite as good. I mean, but honestly, I was just
Yeah.
happy to have the 30 days. It was
Yep.
nice just to have that little extra, bit of money. I mean, I didn't need it. It was, I was getting by just fine on
Hmm.
the base salary and my reserve pay.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I finally got, to the board interview, and they finally called me and said, okay, yeah, we're ready to hire you. I started the academy. I think it was in November of December of 2009. They had like a really long corrections academy. It was like 4 or 5 months long. It was just, like going to college classes on, you show up at
Yeah.
about 8 or 9, excuse me, you show up at 8 or 9 in the morning, you're there till about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and you had classes on law, you had forensics classes,
Hmm.
psychology classes. We had like 2 weeks at the range.
Yep.
They even put us through the driving course, which was kind of cool.
Right.
That the cops went through. So,
In
we got
case
to
there
go
was
down
a
the
jailbreak and you had to do a police chase.
yeah, I guess maybe they just had some space to fill, but it was
Right.
fun.
No, yeah, totally.
Um,
I mean, you might as well train top to bottom at that point. You know,
yeah,
you've got guys in there wanting to do it. You might as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was, the academy was fun. It was good. It was nice having a normal schedule and everything. We were getting paid our full salaries for it too. And then I got out of the academy, and unfortunately, like I finished the academy. We went to our orientation training, which was like 2 or 3 weeks, and then the weekend I was supposed to start my first shift. I went to go work out at the Montgomery Correction Center. It's kind of like a county prison. It's where they send all the
Right.
county sentenced inmates for like
Hmm.
work detail. I
Yeah.
wanted to work out there because it was closer to where I was buying a house, and yeah,
Right.
I'd already worked in mainstream corrections for 3 years.
Convenience. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something different, so I decided to try that. Unfortunately, like the day before I was supposed to go out there, my father died of a heart attack.
Mm.
So, I had to take like my first, I had to take a week
Yeah.
off work, but they were
Immediate.
very,
Yeah.
yeah, they were very that's what I mean. When I called, and like I didn't know what to do. So I just called like the watch commander's office. I'm like, I don't know what to do. They're like, oh, like the person there was like, don't worry, we got you. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna take care of you. So they gave me like the whole 5 days of bereavement leave, and they even said you need a couple more days. You have this much of PTO already built up. So I took a solid week off, to deal
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
to help my family and deal with
Yep.
that. It was, that was a real rough,
Yeah. Yeah. You're
real rough.
transitioning into a new career change, and then all of a sudden you lose someone close to you. Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah. So I show up to work and I start working, I meet my FTO, and, one of the first things he said was, he's like, I'm real sorry about your dad. I know that's real rough. And so I start my training and, everything's going okay. They had me training on the midnight shift, which it was quite frankly kind of boring because
Yeah.
it was 11 p.m. to 7 in the morning. So when we got there,
Everybody's kind of bunked up.
yeah, everything was all the inmates were bunked up. Everything was
Yep.
locked down. There was no more visitation. There was no more public access. And then usually like I think like maybe I think, the only thing we were responsible for was breakfast, like we woke the
Right.
inmates up, we woke them up, we fed them breakfast, and right as we were finishing that, day shift came on and we were walking out
Yeah.
right as the sun
I mean,
came
pretty
up.
much overnight, all you got is your walk around counts, right? And you just do those every couple hours or something.
Yeah, we just had to do a round every hour
That's
and you
it.
had
Yeah.
direct view, the way our pods were set up, you could see everything. We had cameras
Right.
and you had direct vision through
Yeah.
glass,
That's what my
like,
brother tells me all the time. He's like, yeah, we just do our walkthroughs and our counts. That's pretty much all we do. He does a lot of the night shift stuff.
yeah, and all the while doing this, I was going to drill. I took a couple months off of my guard drill because I was transitioning from South Carolina to Florida, and when my dad died, they let me take a couple months off, to deal
Hmm.
with all that. So I started going back to drill again and trying to get back to normal.
Yep.
And yeah, I started working with this. We had this sergeant on our shift. He was this older gentleman, and he was getting really close to retiring. And I don't know what I did or said to rub him the wrong way, but he was the source of my first problems
Yeah.
with my military leave with the sheriff's office. I was coming to work, doing my job, going through my training, and he started asking me for like things like pertaining to my military leave that didn't exist. And there was another officer there that was hired in the class with me who was also in the reserves.
Yeah.
And I knew he wasn't asking this other officer for this stuff.
Right.
So, I'm like right off the bat, I knew there was something wrong, but like he
Hmm.
wanted me to provide like DOD orders for every drill I went to. And I
Right.
said, that doesn't exist, sir. They give us a calendar signed by the commander. It's
Yeah.
like a schedule of events. I turn that in. That's all I
That's it.
told. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, I want the orders. I said, sir, they don't exist.
Yeah. That's
So
not a
I
thing.
even I even went to my command and my guard unit and told them what was going on. They're like, yeah, that doesn't exist. We don't do that for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're going on something beyond drill, like
You're
those don't
right.
exist. I went back to him and just told him, sir, they don't exist. I even gave him like the contact information for the
Right.
full-time staff. I said, if you have a problem, please call these people, then they'll be happy to explain it to you. Well, then he started directing my FTOs to give me like substandard evaluations based on
Right.
insubordination that I wasn't. So, this was really frustrating to me because
Yeah.
it's like this, I'm like, this guy was trying to basically get me fired before
Yeah.
I even finished
And,
training. And
and
then
strange that he's just targeting you.
yeah, and I one night I had a substitute FTO, really nice guy. I think he still works for the sheriff's office, but yeah, this guy was just one of those genuine,
Yeah.
he wasn't like a commander or anything, but he
Yeah.
was one of those guys he'd been around, but he wanted to see the people he worked with
Succeed
succeed.
and move up. Yeah. Yeah.
He looked out for other people. I don't know if he'd ever been in the military, but he just had that thing where he was always, pulling me aside and saying, giving me tips and advice on
Right.
how I could do things better and, how I could improve and, real professional. And when
Hmm.
this started happening, he's like, yeah, this ain't right, man. Let's go talk to the lieutenant. So he marched me into the lieutenant's office and, he said, tell the lieutenant what the sergeant's asking you to do. So I told the lieutenant, the lieutenant, types some keys on his keyboard and says, all your military leave's been approved for the next year. I'm like, then why is this sergeant asking me for additional documentation
Right.
that doesn't exist? He's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna find. He's like, don't worry about this. I'll take care of this for you. So that was the last I heard from that particular problem.
Right.
Yeah, right after I finished my FTO training, I was reassigned to the evening shift, which was like 3 to 11. That was like the more busy shift,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
That's
that's where
before
most,
everybody's laying their head down. Yeah.
yeah, that's where most rookies get sent. That's like the most undesirable shift.
Right. The most chaos happens
So,
probably in those hours. Yeah.
so yeah, I finished I finished off with that. I finished that up and got to the other shift and started my actual, my working duties and whatnot. And we got this other sergeant that came in. He'd gotten transferred in from the main jail, from what I heard, under less than favorable conditions.
Sounds like you
There's
fell in a really unlucky spot at that time in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I don't know, but and I was professional when he came on.
Yeah.
I went and I introduced myself to him, and tried to be professional. Started out, tried to start off on a good foot, and then
Hmm.
just one night, I guess I don't know what happened. I guess he didn't like the way I wrote a report or something, but from then on, he just had it like in for me for some
Right.
reason, and it got so bad, like they ended up moving me off of his squad onto another sergeant's squad for a little while, and everything was going fine. But then when I was getting towards the end of my probation period, this other sergeant that I was working for said, yeah, they're moving you back onto this guy's squad. And I'm like, why? Like none of the other
Yeah.
trainees here, none of the other people on
Are
probation are getting
transferring
moved
around.
around. Why are they doing this to me?
Yeah.
So we went to the lieutenant's office, and this other sergeant, like, he kind of developed a reputation. There were a lot of other military vets that worked with me, and this guy, like, he would come into the housing areas and just start making like disrespectful comments about the military, like, oh, you guys get paid too much, or you get too many benefits. He didn't like the fact that I was getting, I and other reservists and I were getting paid
Right.
extra to go to drill. He didn't like that. He had a real thing
Yeah.
against anyone who was getting paid extra money
As if
from the
his
sheriff's
opinion was
office.
going to change the world of the military, right?
Yeah, it wasn't just the military. Like we had a guy that was going to college and the sheriff's office was paying for
They,
him to go to
they didn't
school.
like that.
He didn't like that either.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like this guy flat out told me, like we were talking, I was in there with some of the other people that I was working with that I'd gone to the academy with, and we were talking about coming off probation. And this guy just made this random comment. He says, if I have my way, you're gonna have a difficult time getting off probation. And I'm like, why?
Yeah. Like,
Like why?
yeah.
Why would you say that?
Am I clocking in, doing my reports? Everybody's safe when I leave, and I'm clocking out. Is that what I'm doing wrong?
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing, like the one eval I had done by this sergeant, like it was all good. Like he actually gave me a good eval, and I don't know like what made him change his
Yep.
opinion of me, but it was all personal. It had nothing to do with my
Yeah.
professional, abilities. So anyway, we end up this other sergeant tells me, yeah, it's like a month or a couple weeks before I'm supposed to get off probation. He tells me they're moving me back onto this other sergeant's squad. So we go to the lieutenant's office, and my sergeant was backing me up on this. He's like, sir, he's doing fine. He doesn't need to
Yeah.
be.
No reason for the transfer.
And then he said, tell the lieutenant what he told you. And I told him that. And he's like, well, I'm going to have a long talk with this Sergeant Rich. His name was Richer.
Right.
I'm going to talk to Sergeant Richer, and I'll make sure you're treated fairly. And I'm like, and I said, sir, why is this happening to me? This isn't happening to any other officers. Like, well, we feel we need to have another evaluator. I'm like, he's already evaluated me.
Yeah.
And then finally, the lieutenant just kind of stomped his foot down. He's like, I'm the lieutenant, and you're going to do what I tell you. It's like, there was just no logic behind it. He
Right.
was basically just, ruling with his iron fist, telling me
It's an
this is what,
authority fit. Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like once they reach sergeant and above, it just starts going to their head. Right.
it really
And
does with
and,
some of
and
them.
it's not and again, I hate to say that as like a blanket statement, but it's not necessarily in so much your police departments all the time, but corrections is what I hear a lot in. Like
It is.
corrections, the guys, because and I think I've heard it different ways, but I've even heard my brother talking about some of the people he works with and stuff, and I think it's more in the correction side, and I think it's because they're behind those walls. It's closed off from the public. There's not a lot of people that can see or say or witness that thing other than the people watching the cameras, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that, once they reach that sergeant and above status, it really does in corrections go to their head. And I've heard that from hundreds of people over the years. Like
Yeah.
correction is an absolute different animal when you reach the higher ranks or you run into those people in the higher ranks.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, like I was never, with this department, I was perfectly happy just being a corrections officer for 20
Yeah.
years. Like I had no desire to
Yeah, it
advance. I was
wasn't
just
like step up. It was just like I wanted to get my pension. This is my goal, right? To get through
Yeah,
this.
like
Yeah.
I was one of those, and there were a lot of other people that felt the same way. It was like do the 8,
Yep.
hit the gate,
That's
and
it.
make that 20 and get that money. That was the
Hmm.
whole idea.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I wanted. And but yeah, so anyway, this sergeant, they put me back on his squad. So like literally when I got back on this guy's squad, I was running that dorm like a chicken with my head cut off. I was doing the job of like 2 officers.
Yeah.
I was giving them no excuses to give me any kind of bad marks. Even other
Yep.
officers, they knew what was going on. They even went to this lieutenant and they're like, you need to have this sergeant back off this guy. Like he's going to run him into the ground. This guy's working like a
Yeah.
road runner on steroids.
Yeah. But
So
he's handling it. Yeah.
yeah, so like I think it was like a week or two before my end of my probation, I get called into the lieutenant's office and then he says, well, you're doing a great job. I'm hearing great things about you. And right as I'm about to breathe a sigh of relief, he says, but I see you've done 38 days of military leave. I said, yeah, I'm in the National Guard.
Yeah.
That's my standard duty. He said, well, you're going to have to do that much longer on probation. And I said, sir, you can't do that. That's against the law.
Right.
I even cited the soldiers
Yep.
and the paragraph of the Soldiers and Sailors Relief Act that prohibits your seniority date from being suspended for
Yep.
taking military leave. And he's like, well, if you don't go along with this, I may not be able to let you off probation at all. And I'm like, based
That
off
sounds more
what?
like his problem.
So anyway, I'm like, sir, I really don't think I'm really I even like I was trying to
Yeah.
be professional with him. I'm like, sir, I really don't think you know what you're doing here. And he not only that, he called he actually gave me an address to human resources and he says, tomorrow, before you come to work, I need you to go down to HR. They have some paperwork for you to sign. And
Nice.
he gave
Yeah.
me a name and a phone number of an individual at HR. So I call this person and they're like, yeah, we need you to come in and sign this paperwork regarding your military leave. And I'm like, what's it in regards to? And they're like, well, it's because you have to do more, they want you to do more probationary time.
Not
I'm
doing
like,
it.
so, and I asked him, does every officer in the military guard or reserves have to sign this? She's like, oh yeah, everybody does this. I'm like, so you'll be able to furnish me like copies of this
Yeah.
document signed by every other reservist that works for the department.
Yep.
And she's like, well, we'll just talk to you about that tomorrow. So, right, I mean,
Huh.
I knew there was just something wrong here.
Something
So
not right there. Yeah.
I didn't know who else to call. And so I called the FOP president, the local one. And,
Yeah.
um, you know, I told him, like, my whole idea was like, can you just come down there and tell me what I'm signing?
Yeah. Come with me
He's
and take a look at this. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, no, no, don't even go. He's like, there's just something. He's like,
That ain't right.
they can't
Yep.
do this. This is against the law. And I said, I told him that, sir. And so he told me not to even go down and sign it. So I didn't.
Right.
I went to work the next day. That was like on a Friday. So the following Monday, I was off work. I got a phone call from the director of corrections and on my personal cell phone. And first thing he asked me, he said, why didn't you go down and sign the paperwork? I said, I was advised by my union FOP
Yeah.
president not to do so. He's like, okay, I'll take that up with him. And he's like, okay, so I don't know what's going on here. I want you to tell me your side of the story. So I basically just did a data dump on this guy and
Right.
told him everything that had been going on from, the whole start to up to that point.
Yeah.
And he just kind of took a big deep breath and said, would you be willing to change work locations in the interest of just quelling this whole thing? I'm like, well, I said, if you want me to, sir, but quite frankly, I don't feel like I should have to. But if
Right.
that's the only way I could keep my job, I just bought another house and everything. I couldn't really afford to be without work. So
Yep.
I went down to work at the main jail. So like, and they made that move so fast. Like
Right.
they didn't even take the keys from me. Like I still had the keys to the other facility I was working
Yeah.
at.
Yeah. You
They
you
didn't
haven't
have
even
me go
had time
clean
to
up my
change out uniforms. Right.
yeah, they didn't even like have me go like give the stuff back. Like they just were separating me
They
as
needed to
quick.
get you out of there. Yeah.
They needed to get me out of there before like it really blew up.
Yep.
But like I found out that paperwork that they were going to have me sign, it would have like basically saying that it was basically saying that I was willing to relinquish all rights to any military like leave that I had.
Right.
Like I would not have been protected under all those laws
Yeah.
if I worked for that department. I'm like, I don't know what they were thinking, but
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever legal team thought that was good for the jail or corrections to do was wrong. Yeah.
yeah, well, it wasn't a team. It was one or two people, and
Yeah.
they just I guess they thought they could keep it quiet and that I would go
A
along
poor
with it.
internal decision. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I went to work down at the jail for a while. Everything was fine there. I got off probation, with the exception of a few minor hiccups. Everything was going well.
Yeah.
Well, one of my friends who was a sergeant back at the work location I'd previously been working at called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got a spot open on my team. Why don't you come back out here and work for me now that you're off probation?" And you
Right.
know, So I said, okay. So I put in a transfer, and
You're
unfortunately,
like, I still got the keys.
yeah, I even said I still got the keys in my lockers out there. Unfortunately, the lieutenant who was out there, I'd had some, I don't know what her problem was, but um yeah, she developed a I don't know what I did wrong to any of these people. Like
Right.
that's the thing. Like
So
I
she just
constantly,
remembered the whole incident or whatever.
yeah, I really don't know what I did or said to these people, but like there was, this lieutenant, when she was down at the jail, she was known for like showing favoritism and this. In fact, that's
Yep.
actually, she ended up getting sent out there under unfavorable conditions. Like that's one thing I noticed with a lot of the supervisors that worked
Yeah.
out there.
Yep.
They were being made to work out there because they weren't,
Yeah.
they kept getting in trouble at the main
It
jail.
was
So
a
they,
punishment thing. Yeah.
it was a punishment thing, whereas most of the officers out there wanted to be there.
Yeah. Disciplinary action in-house. Yeah.
So when I moved out there, she immediately, instead of putting me back on the squad I requested, she put me back on this other sergeant squad that I'd had all the problems with.
Right.
And I was like, oh, here we go again. And
Yep.
like he made it very clear. He's like, it's not going to be like last time. I'm going to document every little thing you do. And finally, it got so bad with him, like just, him like nickel and diming me for everything. I ended up going to the chief's office and telling him what was going on. And he sat down with the chief and I said, look, Lieutenant, I'm not on probation anymore. Like, I don't have to put up with his crap. If you're going to force me to work for this
Right.
guy and he's going to treat me like this, I'm going to keep climbing the chain of command. I'm not going to deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
So she never, because like I'd put in a transfer to move off his squad and she moved four other officers ahead of me.
Yeah.
And
Denying yours. Yeah.
and then, finally she got to the point where like, when now that the chief knows about this, I told her point blank, if you move anyone else ahead of me, I'm going downtown and talking to the director again.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I think that's kind of what sealed my fate in her opinion, like where she realized I have
Right.
to get rid of this guy because I
Yeah.
can't do this to him
Yeah. Then
anymore.
it was looking for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, at that point it was looking for a reason, unfortunately. But so yeah, like when I went to Fort Jackson to do like infantry training, and when I came back, there was like a scheduling error when they put in my leave. My orders had gotten extended while I was out there,
Yep.
and I had to stay another week or two out there. She called me, said, "Why aren't you at work?" I said, "Well, I sent my orders back to the watch commander's office at the jail." When I came back to sign my timesheets, like for every day that I was gone, she put in like no call, no show, like trying to make it look like I didn't show up to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. For an
So I
automatic
actually,
termination. Yeah.
yeah, so she was, so I went to the other lieutenant and she went down to the chief's office. The other chief called that lieutenant back and made her change the timesheet. So,
Yep.
yeah, I came back to work, things were just kind of the same, come to work, do my job. There really wasn't much she could do to me. Like when she was working down at the main jail, like if she didn't like you, she'd put you like in the worst possible spot.
Right.
She'd make you work in like the self-harm dorms or in, the ones that required like the one-on-one surveillance with the inmates where you didn't have access to a computer and you had to basically just sit
Right.
there for your whole shift. I really didn't care about that. After being security forces, that's half your job. So I really
Right.
never,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I guess she realized she was never going to wear me down to
Yeah.
making me quit. So anyway, in 2014, there was a government shutdown. That's when we kind of started with the whole
Yep.
government shutdown things with the debt
Hmm.
ceiling and stuff.
Yep.
Well, I was scheduled to go to drill that month for 3 days. It was a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I was the Thursday night. I was at home with my ex-wife. I was packing up all my stuff, and my squad leader in my reserve unit called me and said, I have to give you an update. He said, we're not reporting in because of the funding issues, because of the sequestration, but you still have orders. So make sure you're available. If anything changes, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And that's not the first time that had happened in my military career. We've gotten
Yeah.
orders and, like you're told, okay,
Something
hurry up and
changes.
wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're basically on hold. Yep.
So anyway, I went to I did exactly what he said. My wife and I hung around the house. We just kind of waited for a call. And no one ever called. And then the next morning, I went to drill on Saturday, and we carried out our duties through the rest of the weekend. So I didn't really think much of it. And then about 4 or 5 months later, my unit gave me an updated drill calendar. A couple of the future dates for the fiscal year had changed,
Mhm.
so I brought it in and I put in the updated leave in the sheriff's office leave system, to get it approved. And I gave the calendar to this lieutenant. Her name was Brokema or Rodriguez. She constantly changed her name because she was always getting married and divorced.
Right.
Um, but anyway, she called me into her office and said, "Can you explain this?" And that one weekend where they'd taken with the Friday, they'd gone back and taken that Friday off the calendar, even though it had already happened for some reason.
Right.
So I explained what happened, and she said, "Well, if you didn't go in, you need to change that day from a military leave day to a personal leave day." And I told her, I'm like, "Well, at the time I had military
Yeah, it
orders."
was military. Yeah.
And she said, "Well, you need to bring me in those orders." I said, "Well, you already have them." She said, "Well, no, it needs to be current, it needs to be date stamped, like now type thing." So I went to my command and I said, "Well, what should I do?" And she said, my command was like, "Well, you did have orders, but if that's what your civilian employer is ordering you to do and it's within their policy, you should probably do what they tell you to do." So I went and talked to someone in the sheriff's office, and this lieutenant had a reputation for like writing people up frivolously for,
Right.
just reading stuff. So, and he knew this. So he said, "Well, yeah, if you don't do it, she's going to write you up for insubordination. If you do it, it's probably just going to cost you your day of leave, and, that'll be the end of it."
Right.
So I said, "Okay." So I went back to work. I withdrew that. I went back like 4 months prior in the leave system, took that day out from military leave, resubmitted it as annual leave day, and she denied the leave request she told me to make.
Right.
So I was like, "Oh crap." So I kind of already knew where this was coming. I didn't think it was going to be as severe, but about a week later, I got a couple phone calls from my first sergeant and my operations NCO, and they're like, "Yeah, you're under investigation from the integrity division of your sheriff's office, which they handle criminal matters, not internal
Right.
like stuff." So and they already were aware of this situation because I'd come and talk to about it. And they're like, "What happened?" I said, "Well, I did what she told me to do, and she denied it, and here we
Oh,
are."
yeah.
So he's like, "Well, if are all your orders documented?" I'm like, "Yeah, they have to be. I've never been granted leave without taking time off, or I've
Hmm.
never been granted leave without submitting the orders." So I gave her I went back to work, and she was just trying to act like nothing happened. She was very two-faced. She'd look at me and smile. And, like, there were several times I just wanted to flip her off or
Right.
tell her to go fuck herself or something
Yeah.
like that. Pardon
Yeah.
my
Just
language,
toss the
but
keys and walk.
yeah, I mean, there was, and but so I called my union. He put me in my union. They changed union presidents, and he put me in touch with one of the union lawyers.
Yeah.
And I explained the situation to him. He's like, "Yeah, you didn't violate any policies. You didn't violate any laws." He said
Yeah.
they'll do their investigation, and they'll just, they'll find your orders and they'll clear you, and that should be the end of it.
Right.
So at some point, about 3 months in the investigation, one of the detectives calls me, and at first he wanted me to come in, and I said, "Well, do you really need me to come in?" And he's like, "Well, we need to clear up, what you did on these orders dates." I said, "Well, all my orders are on file with the sheriff's office." And I said, "If you can't find them, let me know and I'll email them to you." And I left it at that.
Right.
So I never heard back from them. Month went on, and from what I was told, like that should have been the end of their investigation. And
Yeah.
having nothing
They
happened, I
should have been
figured,
able to go back, review your emails anyhow to see what was sent to you, and then that should, like you said, that should have been the end of it because they could find verified evidence of what you were saying. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, so like a month went by. I figured, okay, they closed this out. I just went
Yep.
back to work. Well, I got orders to go on a training assignment. I'd switched over from the guard to the reserves at this point, and I'd been recruited into the intelligence field. And I was supposed to go to intel school out west. And I was I got my orders for that. I turned them in, and I was going to be gone for like 3 or 4 months. I was all excited and everything. So
Hmm.
I was scheduled to fly out on a Monday morning, and I went ahead and took off the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday before that so I could spend some time with my ex-wife.
Yeah.
We had some family in town, and so yeah, I took the time off, and the Friday afternoon before that weekend, I'm sitting in my living room. I lived in another town too. I didn't live in Jacksonville. I lived in Yulee, which is an adjoining county.
Right. Yep. I know where that is. Yep.
I was sitting in my living room, just folding clothes, packing my bag, and I got this. I live in like a ranch style house with an
Hmm.
attached garage. I hear this loud knock at the garage, not the front door, but the garage door to the house, and
Hmm.
I'm expecting it to be like one of my friends or maybe my next door neighbor coming over to ask me to help him move something.
Right.
And I open the door and there's four guys standing there wearing like semi SWAT gear. Um,
Ready to go.
and
Yeah.
and I'm like, can I help you guys? And they said, I'm like thinking, first I'm thinking, is this the right house?
Right.
And they
Yeah.
said, are you Ian Murray? I said, yeah. And they said, are you corrections officer Murray? And I said, yeah. And one of them grabs me and turns me around and cuffs me and says, we have a warrant for your arrest. And I started to chuckle almost. I thought it was a prank. Maybe
Right.
my coworkers were playing on me.
Yeah. Like this is what this is
Um,
all about.
yeah, unfortunately it wasn't though.
No.
Yeah, they took me into custody. Perp walked me down my driveway. They like went back and like did the clearing of my house. One of them used the bathroom in my house.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and they immediately like, they closed the garage door and put me in their car. And I said, I think I need to call my wife. So I called my ex-wife and told her what was happening. She's like, okay. So she said, what do I do? I said, well, just um, I said, I'll be in touch, but in the meantime, call the jail. And my
Mhm.
stepfather was in town. And so she called my stepfather. They were up visiting from Tampa. He was visiting his daughter. And they called the jail. And like they got me down to their little substation area and put me in the interrogation room. And I'm like, is this really happening?
Right.
And they were trying to charge me with official misconduct and grand theft and something else, but there was like three charges. One of them was a felony.
Right.
They trumped up the grand theft charge enough to make it a felony, I guess to glorify their case or something. But I'm going to turn a light on real quick. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just gonna say, I'm looking at one of the articles. This is in the Florida Times Union Jacksonville.com website. And it
Yeah.
has JSO corrections officer arrested for falsifying leave requests. It says local corrections officer has been arrested on charges of grand theft and falsifying official documents by a public servant.
Yeah.
That's what's reported in this media newspaper.
Yeah. And that was all false.
Yeah, I
It's
mean
all
it's just
false.
crazy, right?
So what
So
happened
they
was
get you down to the holding cell.
yeah, they took me down there and they started asking me all these questions like, well, where were you on this date? I'm like, well, what did my orders say? And apparently it wasn't just that one day she told me to switch. There was 3 days I took off to go to MEPS because I was switching branches. And of course I submitted the leave count, the orders for that.
Right.
And I'm like, did you guys like even go look for my orders? And like it was pretty clear they either didn't or they
Yeah.
did. They just omitted it because they were trying to make a case. Because
Right.
if
It's
I'd left and
their
gone on this
system and
military
it's coming
leave,
from your side. Yeah, it's
yeah, if I'd left and gone on this military assignment, they would have lost their jurisdictional authority. They only had 6 months to like effect an arrest on me. So I think what
right.
happened was they just realized, oh, we need to get this guy on something. So
Yeah.
they went to a judge, they lied to the judge, got a warrant signed, and then they went to the media with a false narrative to try and,
Yeah.
discredit me.
Yeah.
So
You create a public rumor about somebody or something,
mhm.
you're gonna get more sway with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, fortunately, my we had enough cash on hand. Like I didn't have to go through a bondsman.
Right.
When I got down to the jail, one of my friends was working booking and he couldn't believe it either. He's like, dude, you're like one of the straightest people I know. How's this happening? I said, I don't know, man. Somebody
Right.
screwed up and it wasn't me. So anyway, like the detectives, like when they were walking me out to the car after they got me away from the cameras, they started like trying to say, well, if you just been more cooperative and this and that, I'm like, what else did I have to do?
Right.
Like, I'm like, is it my job to do your job for you?
Yeah, it's in the system.
Yeah, I mean, this is this should have been cleared up in 5 minutes.
yeah, and the only reason you got it on your radar is that I submitted it.
Hmm.
I mean that's how you guys got a hold of it is I submitted the paperwork.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, the next morning, like my command actually found out about it through the media. Like I didn't even have a
Right.
chance to tell them. Like they saw it and they called me and they were pissed because they knew this was going on.
Yeah.
And so the following Monday, I went home, the dust settled. I couldn't go on my training assignment because my clearance was immediately flagged
Mhm.
because I had criminal charges pending.
Right.
Um, I call back the same lawyer that I'd talked to that told me hey, I'd done nothing wrong. And he's like, well, I'll be happy to represent you for free, but you're going to have to take a plea deal. I'm like,
No.
I'm like, for what? He's like, well, I can probably boil this down to like a misdemeanor, so you'll be able to keep your pension if you're vested. I'm like, I did nothing wrong. You told
Yeah.
me this. You and all your colleagues are the ones that told me this from day one.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if they got a judge to sign a warrant, you must be guilty. I'm like, did you really just say that to
Right.
me?
Yeah.
So I said, I think I need to get a second opinion. So he's like, well, before you make a decision, I'd like you to call me back and, talk to me again. And I'm like, sure. So my stepfather puts me in touch with a lawyer that he's known for like 30 years. This guy's like one of the most, well experienced lawyers in Jacksonville, and he
Yeah.
has his own, he's like he runs his own firm and everything. So
Yep.
I go in and have a meeting with him that same day, and he's like, "Yeah, this is unbelievable." And so he said, "Yeah, you have a pretty much a rock solid defense." And
Right.
one thing he said is, "You have a really good civil case too when this was all over with."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we ended up, I obviously ended up hiring him.
Yeah.
And as soon as I hired him, the following day, probably from that Tuesday to the end of that week, those detectives did more investigating that week than they did the whole 4 months prior.
Oh yeah, they had to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, they went back to my military unit. My military unit pretty much told them to kick rocks. Like, yeah, you
Oh yeah.
guys never, like, why didn't you guys come talk to us before you did this?
Yeah. Yeah.
We would have been happy to give you any documentation you wanted or answer any questions. But yeah, so they basically told them, no, we're not going to help you now. Like we're not going to help you just,
And
destroy
now,
our
now
one of our
you can
soldiers.
submit subpoenas and we'll talk to you that way.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what they did. They
Yep.
came in and tried to drop a subpoena.
Yeah, and subpoenas don't work. A lot of people don't realize subpoenas don't always work in the military. You know what I
No,
mean?
and
It's
that's
a
the
whole
thing.
different level. Those courts are in a different level.
Yeah, so he dropped the subpoena on his desk, and basically you could, like, he even came in and threatened, like, these detectives went in and threatened my full-time staff. He told one of them, like, if you don't cooperate, I'm gonna have you arrested for obstruction. And he got up in this guy's face and said, if you come back in my office again and threaten me or
Yeah.
any other member of this command, I'm gonna call Fox News, tell them that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office is harassing an Army unit and that they falsely arrested one of their own employees for serving in the military. And that was the last time any one of them had
Got heard from them. Yeah.
walked in that building for, during that course of the investigation. So yeah, they came in and they tried to, cover their ass, but it was pretty
Yeah.
much too late. The state attorney, they came, of course, back and were offering me deals, and my lawyers were like,
Yeah.
no, no
And they're
deal.
just
They
doing their
even made a
job.
deal. They even made a deal and said, we'll drop it off. He just simply agrees not to sue us because they knew we were going to
Yeah.
sue him.
Yep.
So like, and we're like, no, you've already
We've
fired
already
that
crossed
bullet.
the line now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crossed the line. You can't turn back now,
Yep.
and I even told him when they had me, like when this whole thing happened, I said, just let me go home,
Yeah.
take me home.
Yeah. We can
I won't forget
discuss
this
this
ever
all,
happened.
we can civilly discuss it, outside of court hearing, but
Yeah, and but unfortunately, I think what happened was as soon as they went and put the cuffs on me, someone made that call to the media, and at that point, they knew
right.
they had to follow through. That's what really kind of sealed their fate, was them running the false story through the media.
Yep.
So anyway, I went, this went on for like another 6 to 8 weeks. The state attorney's office gave him time to try and create a case, but there was nothing to create.
Yeah.
They even got into like the whole semantics of, like orders versus instructions, like what did his
Correct.
supervisor
Yeah.
actually say to him that night on that,
Yeah.
and it all boiled down to like this one day of military leave.
Right.
And that's what they ended up trying to hold this whole thing on. All
Right.
the other days they couldn't do anything with because I did have orders for.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that was the only thing they could, raise a
And
question
that was
on.
literally because you were asked to change it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the lieutenant who told me to do
Oh
it,
yeah. She's
she
denying all.
denied it. She's like, no, I never did that. Even though
Yeah.
this other sergeant too was in the room with her. And like, I'll get to that in a few minutes. But so this, the state attorney basically looks at this. I said, I can't touch this guy. Another interesting thing is the powers that be that handle security clearances, they came in to do a real evaluation on my top secret clearance.
Yep.
They even asked my first sergeant, is this a joke? Like, did this really happen to this
Yeah.
guy? He's like, I'm afraid so. And we've had to fight them off because they've come in here and threatened us to try and cover their tracks.
Yep.
And the guy is like, yeah, he'll have his clearance back by the end of the week. So they gave me my top secret clearance back while the criminal charges were
Yeah.
still pending. Like that's how weak this whole thing
Yeah, that's
was.
how confident they were that this was just a big, huge, blown out of proportion mix up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that from what I heard, that's when the sheriff's office they really got mad at that because they knew they'd pretty
Yeah.
much just lost any,
Oh yeah, for
there was
sure.
nothing left they had. So the state attorney's office ended up dropping the case. I was never even charged with a crime. They never even did the paperwork.
Right.
Like that's how weak it was. Like he
Yeah.
didn't even fill out his initial,
Yep.
charging instruments. Like the only thing that was there was my jail docket that they have to fill out, like when I'm
Yep.
booked into the jail. Beyond that, there was nothing ever done.
Yeah, they knew. Yeah.
So anyway, after that was over, we got a letter from the sheriff's office from their internal affairs division claiming that they'd turned the case over to them. So now they were trying to come after me for doing something wrong administrative.
Yeah, they're handing it down to another level because they knew
Yeah,
there was no charges the state's attorney was going to press.
right.
Now they're
So
going. Now they're going after you, your career professionally as law enforcement. Yep.
yeah, they were trying to get my certification revoked and
Yep.
all that. So
100%. Yeah.
the first thing my lawyer did, and the cool thing with my lawyer, like he was a man of principle. Like I did have to pay him thousands of dollars. I had to sell my
A good
car,
attorney costs money. Yep.
but for the compared to what anyone else would have had to spend, I got
Yeah.
a really good deal because like he even said, yeah, this is a matter of principle. Like, I'm
Right.
not going to let this happen to you. This was a lawyer who was like well into his career. And like for him,
Yeah.
it wasn't about the money. He's like, this is honestly something, if you didn't have any money at all, I'd probably represent you pro bono. The
Yeah.
only reason he
And,
took money
and it
from me
sets
is
a
because
precedent, right? I mean, as an attorney, it sets a precedent, right?
yeah.
You're defending and protecting veterans. You're
Mhm.
protecting career law enforcement people. On both sides of it, you're trying to do, like you said, the principled thing.
Yeah. So anyway, the first thing my lawyers did were I actually had a team of lawyers. It was kind of cool. Like one day I go in and there's this whole board table of lawyers. Like, this
Right.
is your legal team. I'm like, wow, I have a team.
Yeah, this is great.
It's kind of cool to see that.
It's like,
But
where were you
anyway,
guys a couple years ago?
well, yeah, but anyway, yeah, we did like no one ever thought for it was going to go this way. Even the lieutenant who started this whole thing, I don't even think she ended up thinking it would ever go
Realizing,
this
yeah.
far.
Yeah,
But
they
anyway,
thought you would just plea out to a deal, it would be over, they get you out of their hair, and that was it.
well,
They
statistically, that's normally what happens, and
Yeah,
that's why they did it. But anyway, going into the internal affairs investigation, the first thing my lawyer did was he took the entire case file, sent it down to the city manager, and said, explained the situation, said, I want you to tell me if my client actually did something wrong on an administrative level.
right.
And then he also drafted a letter to the internal affairs departments informing them Mr. Murray is represented. If you have any questions or queries, you need to come through us
Yep.
and not contact him directly. So I'm like, cool. So one interesting thing too is I found out the detective that they were using for this part of the investigation, he was also in the military. His name was Malir. And the way I found this out was actually pretty interesting because, I'm in an intel unit,
Right.
and I don't know if this guy was Air Force OSI,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if he just thought the Army was stupid or something. Unfortunately, coming from the Air Force to the Army,
Yeah. You had that
there are people
familiarity. Yeah.
in the Air Force that hold kind of a negative opinion of the Army when they think there's not many smart people in there. But I assure you, there are a lot of smart people in the Army, myself
Mm-hmm.
included. But anyway, we found out what he does in the military because he was going to members of my command and knocking on their doors, and instead of saying, I'm Detective Malir, I'm with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, he was flashing his Air Force OSI credentials saying, I'm Special Agent Malir, I need to talk to you about one of your soldiers. So basically, he was insinuating he was
He was getting
investigating.
information on the military side with that because the subpoena wouldn't get him that far,
Exactly. And
which
he
is
knew
illegal.
that.
Yeah.
And like people were telling him, like, you do know, we know what you're doing is wrong. You're not allowed to whip those credentials out unless you're on Title 10 orders and you're
Yep.
conducting an investigation for your office. And even if I had been under investigation, it would be the Army investigating me, not
Yep.
the Air Force.
Correct.
So like
Not
we
your
like
branch. Yep.
yeah, like people like members of my brigade command were telling this guy, like, you do realize we know what you're doing is wrong and we're going to tell on you.
Yeah.
And he still kept doing it. Like
Kept doing it.
I don't know what he was told from his higher ups, like if he'd do whatever he had to do, if he was promised
Or who
promotion,
he was trying to impress, right? Yeah.
something like that. But anyway, Anyway, so yeah, this went on, and my lawyer's like, yeah, he's pretty much already tainted the case. And we also, this is also around the time we got a letter back from the city attorney, indicating I had done nothing wrong.
Right.
So like between him tainting the case and
And the
me,
city absolutely basically handing you the keys to get off. Yeah.
yeah, so like we knew at that point, okay, like no matter what happens, I'm not going to have to admit guilt anything here that I didn't do.
Yeah. There is no case.
Exactly. So, but that didn't stop him. But I got a phone call from him. He called me directly. I was driving down the road one day and I got a phone call. He said, "Is this corrections officer Murray?" I'm like, "Yeah, can I help you?" He's like, "This is Detective Malier. I need you to come in for an interview." And I'm like, "Did you not get the letter my lawyer sent you about a month and a half ago?" And then he starts yelling at me over the phone. He's like, "I'm not asking. This is not a request. You are going to come in and cooperate with me, blah, 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 blah." And
Click.
uh, well, before I did click, I
Yeah.
clicked my pen. I said, "What's your name and ID number? What's your
Yeah.
phone number?" I said, then I clicked. And
Yeah.
then I called my attorney and told him what was going on. He's like, "Okay, no problem."
Yeah. Now it's
So
time to handle that guy.
yeah, and the guy was dumb enough to actually send me emails to my civilian email account, demanding I come in for an interview. And I'm like, this guy must have like, I don't know where they picked this guy
Must have
up
bumped his
from, but
head somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, like it's kind of scary. If this guy was doing this in the Air Force as an
Right.
OSI agent, I'm like, man, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Dirty. Dirty. Dirty.
but anyway, so he did start calling my lawyer because my lawyer just said ignore him. If he
Mhm.
calls, you have his number, ignore him, don't answer the
Yep.
phone. If he leaves you a voicemail or sends you an email, just forward it to us and
Yeah.
we'll
Just
handle it
save it. Yeah.
accordingly. So finally, my lawyer said, let's go in and like, because my lawyer even I think kind of said this is going to be comical at the very least. Like,
Yeah.
let's
Calling
go
this
in and
guy out. Yeah.
yeah, let's go in and at least see what this guy's going to ask you. So we get in there. My lawyer comes with me. He's sitting there in his interview room, and one of his supervisors was there, I guess, to try and keep him from stepping on his toes too bad.
Too
But
late.
the whole interview, all he's doing is asking me questions. It all, like I said, this all like there was one other instance where it was when I was gone and the orders got sent in. Like he wanted me to clarify that. I said, well, I sent the orders in. If
Yeah.
you know,
You
if
guys
there's a
should
problem
have
with
them.
that leave, you need to talk to whoever submitted that leave on my behalf.
Yep.
Like, okay, that's no problem. And then he says, well, let's talk about this one day. It all came down to this one day. He wanted me to explain like things that my supervisor did, that other soldiers did. He even wanted me to explain why my military command told us not to come in and his didn't.
Right.
I'm like, how am I supposed to explain any of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
But like, because I'm like, I don't know what you really want me to tell you. Like I can't explain what other people did, but like the whole interview, there were no direct questions related to anything I really did.
Right.
So,
He
we
was
ended up,
fishing. Yeah. He was just fishing to try to find something he could trip you up on, and you know,
yeah. And with
but
my
this is
lawyer
this
there,
is our
like
fault.
he kept trying to dig into other things, and my lawyer was objecting, and it drove
Yeah.
them nuts because they're used to just dealing with an FOP rep who's just going to
Yep.
sit there. But yeah, with my lawyer actually making him stay on track, that drove them nuts. They had to
Oh yeah.
take breaks at least twice, to re-strategize their interview because my
Right.
lawyer wasn't having any of it.
Yeah.
And that drove them crazy. But anyway, so the interview ended, and then I got orders to go on my training assignment that I never got to finish or go on. So I get the orders. I fly out to Arizona. I'm out there for about a month, and I get a voicemail from this detective. I ignored him, and I called my lawyer, and he says, "Yeah, he's called me. He says the investigation's completed, and he wants us to come in to discuss the findings." I'm like, well, I obviously can't do that for another few
Right.
weeks. So he calls this guy Malir back. And when he told Malir that I was on military orders, he threw a conniption fit over the phone. Like he's yelling, like, how is he on orders? He's not supposed to be on military orders. Because I guess
Right.
the sheriff's office was under the impression that the military had suspended me too. They didn't know they were feeding
Right.
me extra orders and, giving me, they were
Yeah.
supporting me
You
through
already
this
got
whole
your
thing.
clearance back. You're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So I guess that's when this was all found out.
Yeah.
But anyway, the next day I'm sitting in class and I get pulled out of class by our class manager. He was like a CW4.
Yeah.
And he takes me to another classroom and I'm like, what's going on, sir? He says, tell me about your arrest. And I'm like, excuse me? He's like, yeah, just tell me about your arrest. I'm like, why is this coming up now, sir?
Yeah.
He's like, well, I mean, you have to have a top secret clearance to be here. I'm like, yeah, I do.
And I
That's
have
all
one. Yeah.
yeah, it's all been adjudicated. I'm here under perfectly legitimate pretenses. I said, did you ask my unit about it? They know all about it. He's like, well, I just found out about it today. I said, so I came clean and told him the truth. I didn't have anything to hide from him. And he said, yeah, I got a call from an Air Force OSI agent informing that you've been arrested. Like this guy Malir actually
So
called the schoolhouse.
now this guy is actually really pushing the envelope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he'd taken this to a personal level.
Right.
And my lawyer even said, what did you do? Like, do you know this guy? I said, no, I don't know who this
Yeah.
guy is.
Yeah.
But apparently, like, I don't know. My theory on that is him being Air Force OSI, we were kind of in same fields. I'm Army, he's Air Force, but the field I was going into, it's almost impossible as someone in his capacity to get into. So maybe it was like a jealousy thing.
Right.
But yeah, like this guy like was making it a point just to disrupt my career. It had nothing to do with the investigation. It just, he'd
Oh,
taken
I
it
mean,
to,
it's slander, it's libel. I mean, you're really tinkering personally with somebody and professionally at that
yeah.
level. I mean, that those are, you see it all the time, you hear it on the news. I mean, those things don't turn out well, right?
No.
Someone digs into someone's life like that, you dig in the wrong person's life, that ain't gonna go well.
Yeah, but anyway, so I ended up unfortunately I wasn't able to finish the training because my grandfather passed away and I got sent home on a Red Cross message.
Right.
So I get home, we go to the funeral, I come back to Florida, I let my lawyers know. So he's like, okay, let's go in and deal with these
Yeah, let's
detectives.
get
So
this
we
out of
go
the way.
back to internal affairs. This guy Malir is nowhere to be found, of course.
Right.
But these two other detectives come in and like they were still trying to sustain allegations against me and they were recommending me be fired.
Right.
And I'm like,
They,
like,
they they had to have the last word somewhere, right?
yeah. So anyway, they gave us our options of what we could do. And the one that appealed the most to me was let's have a civil service hearing. Because like, we could have
Yep.
gone into arbitration and we could have taken a deal. I said,
Right.
no, I'm not dealing with these idiots anymore.
Yeah.
I said, I want to take this beyond the sheriff's office. I want someone who's not working in this building to look
Yeah.
at this and tell me that I'm wrong. And then, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, we told them we were going to have the civil service hearing and they're like, okay. So they filled out their little paperwork and, we walked out and like every time we got close to the civil service hearing date, the sheriff's office kept delaying it.
Yeah.
Like it went on for 2 or 3 months. And then finally my lawyer got it nailed down. He's like, got to the point where
They couldn't get out of it.
they couldn't get out of it.
Yep.
Like we're gonna have it. We get a phone call from the undersheriff of Jacksonville. His name's Pat Ivy. I'm gonna say that again, Pat Ivy. And he wants us to come in to sit down and, as he put it, potentially resolve the situation. And I told my lawyer at first, I really don't want to go in and talk to anybody about this anymore. They've had
Yeah.
their chance.
Yeah. It's been dropped. We're moved on.
Yeah, I said,
Time for
I
this to
said,
be over.
let's go to the civil service hearing and let them prove them wrong. So the next day, the undersheriff calls my lawyer, says, well, I'm willing to drop the termination down to 10 days of suspension. And I said, no, I'm not. And even my lawyer, like he didn't even have to ask me. He just like told him, no, we're not agreeing to any deals on this.
Yep.
And so another week goes by. We're getting closer to the civil service hearing, and you know, nothing's really happening. And he asked us again to come in and speak to him. And I told my lawyer, I'm like, do I really need to do this? He's like, let's go in and we can say we did everything we could to try to resolve this peacefully. I said, fine. So I go downtown with my lawyers. We go into the police memorial building. We go into this Pat Ivy's office and, um, we sit down in front of his, he's just sitting behind his big wooden desk, which is like 3 or 4 feet long. And, he's got one of the city attorneys there sitting in the corner taking notes on his behalf and stuff like that. So my lawyer lays out like basically the premise of our case, like, sir, we have, first of all, like this man's character, he's never even been in trouble for a speeding ticket, much less anything like this before.
Yep.
He's a sergeant in the army. He's like, this is an NCO. He's not some, rookie private or something. And then he reminded the sheriff, the undersheriff, like, we have depositions of your detective falsely identifying himself. I have a letter here from the city manager stating he did nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going on and on. And then the undersheriff kind of goes on this offensive, basically like criticizing my whole strategy of like, oh, so you had to go to your union. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what would you have done?
Yeah. That's what they're for.
Yeah. And then my lawyer, and it's like, he starts like basically trying to defend his he starts trying to defend his detective, saying I could have been more cooperative, like around, surrounding the whole
You
arrest.
could have made yourself more guilty.
Yeah, I could have gone in and I could have gone in and incriminated myself for
Yeah.
them and, made their jobs easier.
Yep.
And
That's
then,
what that sounds like. Yeah.
like when it actually got to the point where, like when it boiled down to that one day again, he's like, what did your supervisor tell you? I'm like, he said we had orders for that day and we needed to make ourselves available unless we were called. He's like, well, when it got to be 2 or 3 in the afternoon, you could have gone to work. I'm like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And there was one point where I actually started laughing and he threw me out of his office.
Yeah. My
Like that
my
was the
my supervisor at work would, if I even take a PTO day and I go show up at work, she'll send me home.
Yeah, and that's the
It's
thing,
kind of the
and
same thing as the same type of leave as that. You can't just go
exactly.
show up at your civilian job or your military job if they tell you to wait. You're on hold, but your orders for leave are still there.
Exactly.
Same as PTO. If I put in PTO for 4 hours and I show up at 3.5 hours, chances of my supervisor sending me home is very big.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what happened with this. Like I told him, I'm like, you can't, and it was a liability thing. I said, what
Yeah.
happens if I get hurt at work when I have military orders? Who's going to
Yeah.
cover my medical bills?
Hmm.
So anyway, after he throws me out of his office, my lawyers, they were like trying to like tell this guy, like, this isn't going to just go away.
Yeah.
So we go out of his I my lawyer, I'm on the phone with my ex-wife at the time, and like I'm just chuckling with her. I'm like, yeah, this was a complete waste of time.
Hmm.
And my lawyers come out, and the undersheriff walks out behind him, and he's like mean mugging me, and I just looked at him kind of like
Yeah.
and like turned around and walked away. I just kind of laughed and walked away, and so my lawyer's like, well, unfortunately, that didn't go the way I was hoping. I was hoping him being in the position he's in, he would have been a little more understanding and, you
But
know,
yeah, moved on.
but apparently this guy, he's just on the same page as everybody else. They're just interested in trying to cover this up. So like we're within at this point, we're like within maybe a week of the civil service hearing, so the next day I get a phone call from my lawyer and he says, I got a call from the city attorney and they're willing to offer you like $12,000, which was basically my back pay,
Right.
in order to just not go to the civil service hearing. And I'm like, okay, so they're going to drop the disciplinary allegations too. He's like, no, those still stand. I said, no deal.
Yeah. No deal. Yeah.
So then the harassment campaign began. I started getting letters, like we're within 2 days of the hearing at this point. I started getting letters from the sheriff's office. I got well, none of them showed on the letters part, none of them showed up to like the day like before the hearing, and they were expecting me to come back to work basically. And they were trying to use the excuse if I didn't come back to work, I couldn't have the hearing. And my lawyer's like,
Right.
no, you have to give him at least 72 hours notice. That's your departmental policy. And it wasn't just that. People were coming to my house. My ex-wife was followed to work a couple times by an unmarked police car. Well, one day I was in my I don't know where I was, but my wife was in the house alone, my ex-wife, and someone came to the house and was banging and kicking on the door. My next door neighbor called me and said, hey, there's a rather large guy wearing a JSO polo shirt driving a white unmarked Impala kicking on your front door, not just knocking, but like
Yeah.
kicking on my front door. He left boot marks on my door when I saw it later. And when my wife was so scared, she went and armed herself. She actually
Right.
went and got her. And I told her, if she called me and was in like panic, I
Yeah.
said,
She's
if he
thinking it's a
comes in that
home
house,
invasion
you
or
know what to
something.
do.
Yeah.
But when this guy turned around and saw my neighbor at the fence line taking pictures of him in his car, he immediately left.
Right.
So anyway, we get to like the 11th hour, and one of my supervisors from the military calls me and says that day they finally sent him like a subpoena command to come and testify at the civil service hearing. So like even up to this point, they had done no preparation
Right.
for this hearing. Like I guess they felt like it was anything else. It wasn't going to happen. Like we were going
Yeah.
to work something out before it actually happened.
Yep.
Whereas we had like a literally, we had boxes of files, like, four of these
Yeah.
boxes, like just
Yep.
ready to go in there. But the sheriff's office hadn't done a thing.
Yeah.
And literally at the 11th hour, I think it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, the night before the hearing, my lawyer calls me and says, okay, they're willing to drop everything, drop all the allegations, hold nothing against you if you just don't show up. And I said, okay, fine. And that's ultimately what I wanted anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
part of me did want to still go through the hearing and, drag him through the
Yeah.
mud. But I said, I'm getting what I want.
Well, if you do that, you get it on record. Then that's
Yeah.
what they didn't want. They did not want to have your attorney get them on record to where now you have a public source of communication.
Yeah.
Because once that goes to the media, that blows out their whole narrative and really puts the sheriff's office in a bad light.
Yeah. So they ended up dropping everything. I ended up resigning, of course. There was no way I was
Yeah.
going to go back to work after that. And, we ended up filing a law. Well, there were a few things that happened when I finally got through the intelligence training the following year in 2016, I immediately got orders to go to Afghanistan. I went through Afghanistan, came back. Unfortunately, right after Afghanistan, I had to go through a divorce. My wife decided to pursue other ventures in life, I guess, that didn't involve
Right.
me.
Right.
And then in 2000, I think it was in late 2018, we filed a lawsuit for the false arrest, the false imprisonment, everything like that. And the sheriff like went through all these bizarre steps to try to create conflicts of interest. He was appointing my lawyer to be on task force with the city to help improve sheriff's office transparency and all that. And, was trying to create all these conflicts of interest, which none of them really stuck. But then, in their end defense, when we got to the point where when we were starting to depose people, the detectives basically just played dumb.
Right.
They basically said, "Oh, well, we thought we'd done our jobs correctly." So basically, they were trying to take out the whole ill intent part.
Yep.
And again, just like the civil service hearing the week before, they offered us a settlement out of court, and at that point, I was fine to take it because that was enough for me to, where I can say, it wasn't as much, it wasn't like a, big 6 or 7 figure settlement, but it was enough for me to
Right.
say, you know, they caved. I won.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had to bend and I didn't.
Yeah. And that puts it on record. You know.
Yeah. So, and but the real salty part of this is after this was all over, after 8 years, Bruce, you mentioned Bruce earlier.
Yep.
He's an acquaintance of my mother. My mom's a published author.
Hmm.
My big thing was I wanted my name to get cleared through the media.
Right.
And we made numerous contacts through all those media outlets,
Yep.
and they did not even respond to us.
Media works. So just a little, and you probably know this now, but I've been a journalist for quite a few years. Um, the media works directly to support, and again, there's contacts in the police department for journalists, right?
Yep.
Journalists love a good contact in a police department, right? So they're
And that's the
always gonna
problem.
they're always gonna, for the most part, shed a good light on the police department. And when citizens, and I've dealt with this in the past with municipalities, that's why you don't hear about a lot of people or citizens being able to go and sue a municipality because it's so hard to get the media to support something like that, to build a case and get the word out. And so that's why you have a lot of those old good old boy network towns that still operate these days because it's hard to get the media to turn or even tell the truth about a police office, or a sheriff's office because they absolutely don't want to lose the right to have stories ahead of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. And by the time this was all over too,
And the police use the media as well as a tool. They use
they
it
do. Yeah,
to,
and that's exactly
to
what.
catch people and to put feelers out there and shake up the community for investigations. So yeah, I mean I get it, but at the same time, we live in a world where the media is very dishonest.
Oh, trust me. Yeah.
It's
And I hate to use that term fake news, but everything they aired about me was fake.
it's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was also like another issue, like when this all ended, I went to the army about filing USERRA complaints, and um they basically indicated like, yeah, unfortunately, because of the lawsuit that it's all settled now, there's really not much more we can do to them.
Yep.
Um, but the on one saving grace, that detective, that Moliere guy,
Yep.
I was told off record that he did lose his Air Force OSI badge.
And should have. Yeah.
Yeah,
And should
and
have.
but another thing is too, like that's another reason I think he took such a personal disinterest in me because when he called that schoolhouse and tried to get me kicked out, like it had already been reported that he was doing this and that he was already in
Right.
the process of being stripped of his
Yep.
credentials.
Yep.
And I think that's what got him so salty.
Yeah.
But again, this was his doing. Like I didn't do anything wrong in this whole thing, I
Yeah.
mean, and but like I said, in retrospect, it's I started doing these interviews to not only clear my name, that was my big concern at first, but after my name got cleared and I still had people wanting to one of these podcasts I did, someone told me it had like well over 1.5 million views in the first week.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I've had people in my command up here, my job, my church come in and ask me about it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're a star now. And when I Google my name now, those interviews come
Comes
up
up.
ahead of the news
Yeah.
articles that were run about me at the time of
Yep.
the incident. So that's ultimately what I wanted. But I keep doing this now because, one thing that stuck in my head when this whole thing was going on, the FOP president even called me trying to get me to take a deal, to help quell it before a sheriff's election. And
Yep.
I told him I stuck to my guns. I said, no, you told me I did nothing wrong. And this is why I didn't involve you guys because I knew you were biased
Right.
towards the sheriff's office. And he even said, I'm glad you're sticking to your guns because they've done this to people and gotten away with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm
And
sure.
that's the thing. Like, I know if my department did it to me and other people are so like by
Yeah.
me getting this out, it lets people know there are things you can do as a service member that you have rights. You don't just have to take this.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
something like this happens to you, there are avenues. In fact, since this happened, like one of my contracting jobs up here, like I've actually had to take action because when I was on orders in Germany, they tried firing me with no reason.
Right.
And I had to call the JAG office. The JAG office called them, and
Hmm.
miraculously, I had a job when I came home.
Yeah.
But like I tell people, I'm like, I tell that to my like when we get new soldiers in my unit, that's like one of the first things. Even in my I have a bachelor's in management that I've earned since this whole thing, and we've had to take classes on human right on labor laws,
Yep.
civil rights, civil liberties. And one thing I have actually written papers and essays on is the laws concerning military reservists, because those are almost never discussed.
Right.
You hear about the whole the civil rights movement of 1965. You hear
Hmm.
about, you can't fire someone because they're pregnant. You can't fire
Yep.
someone because of their religion. You never hear anyone talk about you can't fire someone because they're in the military. You almost never
Right.
hear about that.
Yep.
And like even my professors have said, I'm glad you did this because this needs to get out.
Yeah.
And I'm
It's
actually going to be going to grad school this fall. I'm going to be starting off getting my master's. If I ever get into a point like where I'm up in that doctoral level and I'm publishing
right.
papers, I'm actually going to try to publish. I don't know if I'm ever going to write a book about this, but I'm going to at least try to publish papers and articles
Right.
um, about this subject. This is something for me that's never going to die. Like, I mean, after going through this, I'm never going to give up on this. I'm going
Well,
to be fighting for
well,
this cause my entire
and
life.
and that's good because, like you said, there's nothing. I mean, it's almost a again a topic that's not touched on, but the side of that is how many how many veterans come back from active duty or retire and deal with trying to get a job in civilian, and there's overlap, or stay active duty or even reserve and go through what you're going through, but they don't know what their options are. They don't know if their employer is doing the right thing. All they're wanting is they're coming out, they want a job. They don't know if okay, I'm signing this paper because they asked me to and I want to keep my job. They don't know if
Right.
that's a good or bad, and so it's good that you're doing that. It's good that you're voicing that and being an advocate for other veterans, and also shedding light on, corrections and law enforcement. I think we tend to, and of course we know this, there's stories after stories. I mean, as we're sitting here talking, I mean, I'm pulling up stories about Pat Ivy. I'm pulling up different stories about different people, and I'm looking at that stuff. But I mean, there's story after story about police officers not doing the right thing, right? Or
Mhm.
showing some favoritism, discriminating against somebody, pushing them out of the job. I mean, all these things come up, and while, we always like to say it's not, the one should, you don't want the one to ruin it for all of them, right? we don't want to shed bad light on police officers. There's good law enforcement out there, right? There's good veterans out
Absolutely.
there, right? And so it's kind of one of those, it's good that you're being an advocate for really for both sides, because you've come from both sides. But I think I agree with you. You have to bring some clarity to what are the rights of anybody in that position. Um, I mean, God forbid somebody lose their military career or pension over a falsehood, let alone ruin your professional career in law enforcement or any real civil professional job. It's your story is crazy, and the fact that it dragged out as long as it did.
Well, that was their idea. They drug it out thinking that, we drag this out, he'll give in or
He's
he'll
gonna
forget
cave,
about it.
or yeah, he's gonna cave, or he's just gonna give us what we want to shut it up. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like I said, they told me the FOP president told me he's like most people take the deal. Most people when
yeah,
this happened, they strategize it that way. When they did this,
yep,
they take away your paycheck, they publicly humiliate you, and
yep,
most people are so desperate to get out from under it, they'll take a deal. But I wasn't, and that's another thing. Like I'm not like a rich person, but I
yeah,
I do plan ahead financially for emergencies. I never thought this would be an emergency where I'd have to,
right,
spend my nest egg on, but
yeah,
um, my lawyer even said if they'd looked into you as a person
right,
before they did this, they probably would have never done it. They were just going with the odds because they're so used to just doing this, getting their little
yeah.
bronze star.
Steamroll right over someone.
And
Yeah,
most of those detectives too, like another thing I left out earlier, most of those integrity detectives, I found out like they were either coming off the street trying to get up higher up in the detective ranks,
yep,
or they'd been demoted and
yeah,
were being punished.
yeah,
Like the detective that was in charge of my place, you could tell he was fresh off the street. He quite
mhm,
frankly he wasn't really doing anything. He was just stamping his name on everything.
yeah,
His colleagues. And then another guy I talked to that was there when I was arrested, um, he'd been a homicide detective for 20 years.
yeah,
And I asked him, why would you go from being a homicide detective to doing this? And he never answered.
yeah.
Because I mean, that's quite frankly a scary thought. If they're doing this kind of sloppy work on an internal level, like what are they doing in criminal cases? Are they sending
Right.
people to prison for
Yeah.
crimes they didn't commit? I mean, are
Yeah.
people sitting on death row because
I
these
mean,
guys
you hear it
fabricated
more and
employment
more. I mean, you
evidence?
hear those stories more and more about DNA evidence releases somebody who is innocent, who is charged by a police department in a small town, or, you hear these stories.
It's a
It's
scary thought. And the sad thing is, none of these people got, from what I understand, none of them ever really got punished. None of
Well,
them,
that was exactly what I was going to say next is none of these people in any way, shape, or form probably got any disciplinary action because again, you walked away free and clear and got your name cleared as far as it on paper and record. So they didn't have a reason there was no reason to do any of that, right? I mean,
yeah,
he got a disciplinary. The lieutenant didn't lose her job, or the sergeant, so
they both retired with this all
if
going
anything,
on.
they're retired now or they've moved on to a different jail, different position. And again, we touched on it earlier. It's scary to know that type of level of or that character comes into people with that level of authority, right? Because these are people on the correction side. I mean, and even in jails, these are people that are put in those positions even though the people that they're watching in there, they're protecting the lives of human beings, even if those people are criminals. So it's kind of scary that these people are in these authoritarian positions or these higher level positions, and they're supposed to be watching and protecting lives, even though these lives other people may judge these lives on different levels as criminals. That's what the role is. But then they steamroll someone like you who's on their team watching over these people. So it's kind of scary to know that that's what you have going on in some cases.
Well, and one positive thing too, another thing that came out of this is I did find out after this all was done, they did have to make massive policy revisions because this case cost the city
Oh, I
probably
bet.
over, it was
Yeah.
probably like $1 million case, even though I didn't get a lot of the money.
Yeah. That's
My
where city
lawyers,
attorneys and city managers step in. They're like, we've got to change this.
well,
Yeah.
my lawyer said, like, well, just to give you an example, if we go to court, because if you file a lawsuit against someone and you lose, you have to pay their attorney
Oh, yeah.
fees. He said if we lose, like we'd be looking at a
You'd be
quarter
in debt.
million dollars
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
So like
You'd
just
be
in their
in
city
debt.
attorney's fees, they spent a quarter of $1 million.
Oh, yeah. And they inflate all that. Yeah.
So I mean, that's what I mean. You figure the man hours, the
Yep.
all the time that everyone had to spend on this, it was easily probably over the course of 8 years, it was probably a good $1 million that it cost the
Oh,
city.
I'm sure. If
And
that's where they would put it. Yeah.
yeah, and so but the nice thing is though, that is one thing I'm happy to at least say, that I had the resilience to deal with this. So now maybe next officer doesn't. Because
Yeah.
my lawyer did say they'll think twice before they do this again. I guarantee it. But like
Yeah.
they've made policy that like the detectives can't just take their paperwork to a judge and have it signed. They have to run it through their whole chain of command.
Yep.
And the chain of command has to like go back and look at all the different, especially with military leave now, they have to go back and check every source of where there could be military. Like even if it's not on file at the sheriff's office, they have to like go out and
They have
actually
to do
look.
their diligence. Yeah.
They have to do their diligence now.
Which
They
they
can't,
should have done in your case.
yeah. But it sucks. I kind of had to be it sucks. I had to be the sacrificial
Lamb.
lamb for this whole thing. But honestly, I'm just kind of glad that I have the willpower and the resilience because I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but I'm one of those people. All I have is when it comes down to it, all I have is my word and my integrity, and I'm not
That's it.
sacrificing that for anybody.
No, no,
And I
and
wasn't about
again,
to for
you
this.
knew you did nothing wrong, and
Mhm.
again, it's sad. I mean, it's sad to think that there's probably, like you said, there's probably people locked up over this or worse on whether it's trumped up charges or whatever it may be. It is really sad. Um, so where do you go from here? You talked about, obviously going grad school, moving forward, getting a degree, maybe potentially authoring some stuff or writing some stuff on this.
Well,
Uh,
those
how
are
do you push forward on advocacy? How do you help spread the word for your military brothers? How do you help spread the word into law enforcement, and help them understand?
well, like I said, whenever I, have the chance to mentor new soldiers that are coming in, I always, remind them if they tell me they're having issues with work. I always am very, tell them,
Hmm.
if you're having problems at work, go talk to me or the commander or someone in charge so that we can, help you with this. But yeah, the all that other stuff is kind of long-term goals. But
Yeah.
yeah, my short-term goal is I'm hoping to I got injured on my last deployment, unfortunately. I was in Djibouti and I've got some cervical spine and shoulder problems now. I'm
Mhm.
working with the VA, but I'm hoping to retire soon. I've got 22 years in. So I'm in the process of compiling all my points and documents and documentation and, seeing if I can possibly go
Yeah.
ahead and retire. And it'll make it easier for me to do this too, not being attached to the military because I can speak more freely. I don't
Right.
have to, I don't have to get approval from anybody if I want to go out and do like
Yeah.
a public speaking session or
You're
something
still
like that.
protecting your career at this point. It's understandable
Exactly.
and respectable.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been working as a private contractor for the government for the last 6 years. It's been a great line of work. And, I may go back into that after I finish grad school too. Because I'm going to keep that, that security clearance is going to be good for several years even after I get out. But yeah, I guess my 100-meter target at this time is to, get back. I start grad school this fall. Start taking that, hopefully get my master's in about a year or two. And then possibly, the school I'm going to, they're already like trying to convince me possibly to do the doctoral program just because of
Right.
all my life experience. Some of the admissions people have said, all you need is a couple of letters of recommendation. You've got more than enough
Yeah.
experience in life to justify you admitting you into the PhD program. My mom loves the idea of that because she's a
Right.
PhD in psychology.
Yeah.
And like both her parents, my grandfather didn't even finish high school. So it's like, to have dual generational doctors in the family, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I definitely plan on continuing to make this part of my life, advocating for veterans. I'd love the opportunity if I could find if not start my own
Yeah.
organization, going to work for a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and managing a some kind of veteran advocacy program, or maybe going to work for the VA and being a some kind of
Liaison for them.
liaison or something like that, but that's ultimately what I'd like to do at this point with the
I
rest
mean,
of
I,
my
I
career.
think it's needed, right? I think there's so many angles, on so many levels for veterans it's needed. There's so many places where the VA doesn't have the funding or doesn't have the resources to really things like this in place. And that's where people like you come along and your experience puts it in on the radars for them to be like, well, you're right, we don't have this, but if you did this on your own and set up something, I bet you there's a way this would work to help. to continue on helping veterans, getting the word out.
Yeah, because quite frankly, I've had a lot of trades under my hat, but I could go to work and just do a job, but like I said, I'd still want to keep this up because unfortunately, as long as we have reservists and guard members in our military, we're going to have these kind of problems.
Yeah, of course.
And
And again, as long as you have people ranking up that have real bad authority issues,
yeah,
that can't hold down a job without stomping on somebody,
I know, and it's so sad too because and I don't know if it's
I've always been raised to lift people up.
yeah,
I'm a supervisor over 6 guys under me, and in my career, and I tell them all the time, my job is not to come here and bark orders at you guys. My job is to make you guys successful, and if I don't make you guys successful in your roles, then I fail at my role.
yeah, I've tried.
I'm not here to tell them how to do their job. I'm here to show them and help them get the resources to do their job right to make them successful.
Yeah, and I've tried to instill that in, people I supervise and lead
Yep.
too. I'm a staff sergeant. I've had anywhere from two to, dozens of people under me
Yep.
at one time. And I've always tried to maintain professionalism. Ever since I got my first set of stripes, that's always been my thing. I've always tried to be
Mhm.
professional especially when I had to deal with the situations in the sheriff's office. I always tried to be professional. I never yelled, I never screamed,
Yep.
and I never demeaned anybody. But I don't know what it is in law enforcement, but like being military police and having worked in two different
Yep.
corrections departments, not everybody, but there are a lot of unhappy people in that line of work.
Yeah.
And the only way they can make themselves happy is to make everyone else around them as
Miserable.
miserable as they
Yes.
are. And
Yes.
that seemed to be the
To
case with this
lift
because,
themselves up by stomping on others.
yeah, and maybe that was part of the problem everyone had with me. I came to work, I was happy, I was perfectly happy to come
Yeah.
to work, earn my paycheck. I was usually in a good mood. Things were going well for me at home, but so many people I worked with, that wasn't the case, and
Yeah.
that I think that was honestly a source of why a lot of people had a problem with me. They just didn't like the fact that I was happy with what I was doing,
Yeah.
and
And people professionally get jealous if someone can perform a job better than they can. Of course, they're never going to tell you that you're doing better than they are, but when you can outperform someone without even trying, and it's not like you're trying, it's just you're doing your job to the best of your ability. And like you said, you're professional. In my career, I'm the same way. I do things, I cross my T's, I dot my I's, I follow up communications with my supervisors to make sure I'm making every good decision for the company. I
Mhm.
think it's just, some people are like that, but then you have other people in higher up roles and they see someone achieving these things at work and they can't handle it. It's like
Yeah,
they're
it's like
almost making them look bad by actually doing the job.
I've been in military units like that too.
Yeah. And it's
Unfortunately,
sad
it's
that anyone would be that way because you're a team, right?
yeah. I've been in military units where it was so bad where I've gotten in front of my commander and first sergeant and I told them there's several people in this unit I would not trust on the battlefield to watch my
Yep.
back.
Yep.
It's like it was that bad.
Yeah.
And it's just sad because it's like, what are we here for? We're here to protect each other and look out for each other. And it's not you're it's like you're just afraid this guy's gonna outshine you somehow. So you're willing to try and ruin his career. Like
Right.
that's but yeah, it really is sad that we have to deal with that. Unfortunately, like I said, I've always tried to take the high road and
Yep.
utilize chain of command, and that is honestly too why I've been pursuing degrees in management and leadership because even though I've got experience with it, I'm learning more leadership doctrines. I'm learning a lot more philosophical
Yep. There's never
topics on it.
enough. I'm 49. I honestly have gone back to school and got more certificates and more degrees as I got over my 30s. Because I love gaining the knowledge, but I know that you can never have enough management skills, and I've owned multiple businesses, but now I work on a director's level on a higher up for the company I work for. And it really is, and I'm in the senior industry now. So I affect I consider my grandma and my grandpa, so day in and day out, I'm taking care of hundreds of people's grandmas and grandpas and moms and dads. And for me in this industry, the more management and the more support I can learn is the more support I can help my crew so that they can support seniors, internationally, let alone nationally. Senior industry is where I've been for a few years, and that's kind of what I lean into is the management side of it. As we wrap it up here, Ian, there's one thing I like to do on the show. At the end of the show, I always ask somebody, obviously your story is one that probably would probably be an easy answer for you, but for somebody out there in the audience that may be struggling, give us this might be the example for somebody struggling out there. Give an example of how you've pushed through maybe one of the worst moments in your life or struggles like this. What got you through it and what helped you work through it?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people out there that can and will help you. And don't give up. Just keep pushing through. It may not be the most pleasant journey, but the destination is worth it.
Excellent, excellent. I mean, Ian, again, your story is amazing. Again, I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but I'll mention it again. IanMurray.net is the website you can go to. You can also, it has on here a contact for some of our people listening that may want some more information from Ian, or maybe want to hear a little more of what he's learned about this to help maybe in a situation you're in. There's a contact link on his page to reach out and make contact. The stories on here, interviews, other interviews that he's done are on here. We'll have this released probably within, I believe we'll release this one next week. This will be one of the next episodes coming out. So we'll get this one up probably next Tuesday. It'll probably release Wednesday. But Ian, it's been great having you on the show.
Absolutely.
Amazing story. So glad. It's not often we get people on the show that have a happy ending to the story. And while your story's tough and you dealt with that for 8 years, it at least there was a good ending for you and you weren't just steamrolled over. So I love having a good happy ending type of story on here. So thank you for coming on, and we'll always invite you back. We usually invite guests back within a year to kind of see where they're
Sure.
at. So we'll invite you back on in about a year.
That'd be great. I'd love to follow up and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's
For
great
sure.
to always be able to spread the word on this kind of stuff.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Ian, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.